Welcome into Steelers Talk. I'm your host, Jack Sperry. We're just a couple days away from Ravens week, man. Steelers versus Ravens here in week 14, and an absolutely massive matchup between the black and gold and the Ratbirds. We're going to be going live for that game, guys, on Sunday starting at 12 p.m. Eastern Time on the channel. So if you guys want to join the largest Steelers watch parties anywhere here on YouTube during this season, make sure you click that subscribe button. We're also going to get you guys some more coverage tomorrow in case there's practice squad elevations, anything like that. But today we've got injury updates for you guys. We got quite a bit to talk about, so let's just jump right in. We'll start with the Ravens. Lamar Jackson, who missed practice yesterday, was back at practice today, and he is officially a go for Sunday afternoon. Just like I said on yesterday's show, guys, I really doubt that Lamar Jackson was ever going to miss this game. He apparently got stepped on Wednesday's practice, and he's dealing with a little bit of a bum ankle right now, which should affect his mobility, but he will be out there on Sunday to take on the Pittsburgh Steelers in, so far, their biggest game of the 2025 NFL season. Now, I say this, and this was the case even before he got stepped on this week. Lamar Jackson has not been moving around the same way that we expect Lamar Jackson to be moving around. And he's not his normal MVP caliber self. All right, his pressure to sack ratio is like 25% this year. That is way higher than his career average. He's not pulling the trigger in the pocket with the same kind of decisiveness that we're used to seeing. And his production has really suffered because of that, especially since coming back from that hamstring injury. So he's been dealing with a bunch of different stuff. A couple of weeks ago it was a foot issue. Of course, he dealt with the hamstring. Now it's an ankle. There's a lot of lower body issues going on with Lamar Jackson at this point in time. So if you're expecting him to run all over the Pittsburgh Steelers defense, I wouldn't expect that. He still has a lot of arm talent, so that still needs to be dealt with, of course. And I still think Lamar gives the Ravens a better chance of winning this week compared to, say, Snoop Huntley, who would have started if Lamar couldn't go. But it's not like Lamar Jackson playing is necessarily going to be my biggest worry in this football game, guys. My biggest worry, as I've been discussing all week, is the Steelers' run defense going up against Derrick Henry in this Ravens rushing attack. Of course, Henry just completely carved up the Pittsburgh Steelers' run defense last year in the final two games that this team played against the Ravens. And just last week, we saw something very similar against the Buffalo Bills, where James Cook ran for 144 yards. It was the most rushing yards given up by a Steelers defense in Acrisure Stadium history. It was embarrassing, right? So to come off that performance and to have Derek Harmon still out of the lineup this week, and now, as we'll talk about later, Kyle Duggar, your best run defending safety, being out this week, and your strong safety, those are two pretty key cogs in the machine here to stop Derrick Henry on the defensive side of the ball. So it really does come down to this for me, guys. If the Steelers can stop Derrick Henry in the run game and they can contain him, maybe force a fumble or two from Derrick Henry. He's had some fumbles this year. The Steelers will have a chance to win this ball game, even on the road. But if they can't do that, and if Derrick Henry once again just runs all over the Steelers defense, the Steelers are going to lose this ball game. So that's still the number one thing the Steelers defense needs to take advantage of and needs to do in this ball game if they want to win. But the final Ravens injury update here that you guys should know about is that starting corner Nate Wiggins will be playing on Sunday as well. He has been given the full go. So it'll be him and either Marlon Humphrey or Chido Awuzie on the other side of him on Sunday afternoon. So keep that in mind. Nate Wiggins will be playing on Sunday. Now we shift our focus to the Pittsburgh Steelers injury report, where the big news of the day is that Kyle Duggar, the starting strong safety, is officially out with a hand injury. He suffered that hand injury in Wednesday's practice, and he is not going to be able to go. Now the question now becomes, does Chuck Clark go in there as the starting strong safety, or does Jabril Peppers come in at that point? If you listen to the depth chart on the Pittsburgh Steelers website, it would indicate that it's going to be Jabril Peppers. And Jabril was talking after practice today about how he's been waiting for this opportunity to get more playing time. So that indicates that Jabril Peppers could be in line to start. But then there's some reporting out there from guys like Nick Farabaugh from Penn Live and others that Chuck Clark is expected to start on Sunday. So there's some mixed reporting out there. We'll see if we get an answer before kickoff on Sunday. But just to give my 2 cents on this, guys, if I'm Mike Tomlin, if I'm Teryl Austin, it's not even a discussion for me. Chuck Clark has had a lot of struggles playing in the Steelers defense this year. He's slow. He doesn't have nearly the instincts that you need, and his tackling has not been up to snuff either. And I think that that's going to be really, really big this week, is to stop the Ravens run game, as we have talked about time and time again, not only on this video, but in previous videos this week. So I think Jabril Peppers has to be the starting strong safety. He played actually really well in his only lone start this season. It was in week 3 versus the New England Patriots. And what'd they do? They shut down the Patriots run game, forced multiple fumbles. Peppers was one of the people that recovered a fumble and forced one. His PFF grade was over a 90 in that game, and he hasn't seen a start since. So I know the Steelers really like using Jabril as a special teams ace and all that different stuff. But you gotta be, on your P's and Q's. You gotta be tightened up on the defensive side of the ball if you want to win this game. Don't think that's going to be as likely or as possible with Chuck Clark in there at strong safety. I think Jabril Peppers gives this defense a fighting chance at containing Derrick Henry, and I love his competitiveness. I love his experience. I love his versatility. In my opinion, Jabril Peppers has to be the other starting safety along with Jalen Ramsey on Sunday afternoon, but we'll see if this Steelers coaching staff is smart enough to make that decision. But then the rest of the injury report, pretty positive. Patrick Queen is a full go. No injury designation after suffering a glute injury last week against the Bills, so he will be playing. James Pierre dealing with concussion protocol this week. He will be in this week as well. TJ Watt is a full go as well. Missed Wednesday's practice with a toe injury that he's dealing with, but he's going to be good to go. And then Joey Porter Jr., who suffered an elbow injury in Wednesday's practice, was limited yesterday, was a full participant today. He'll be good to go for Saturday, or for Sunday, I should say. Now, the big question in terms of that bit of information is who's going to be the number 2 starting outside corner. Last week, James Pierre got the start over Asante Samuel Jr. Asante played quite a bit in relief of Pierre. And now this week, you're going to have both Pierre and Samuel available to you. So the question becomes, which one gets the start on the outside? Last week, Pierre got that start, but I think Mike Tomlin and Teryl Austin were both very complimentary of Asante Samuel Jr. in their press conferences this week. So it wouldn't shock me at all to see them give Samuel a crack at the starting job this week. So definitely some moving pieces and some big question marks in the secondary for the Steelers heading into this football game. Who's going to start at strong safety, Jabril Peppers or Chuck Clark, and who's going to start at the second outside cornerback position, James Pierre or Asante Samuel Jr.? I'm guessing we'll get answers to those questions probably before kickoff, just before kickoff on Sunday. So make sure you guys tune into our pregame show on the Watch Party on Sunday afternoon to get that news before we kick things off. But also some bad news on the injury front today is that rookie cornerback that just got back to practice this week, Dante Kent. The Steelers are really high on Kent. He was looking pretty good in training camp before he got injured, and he's been on IR ever since that injury. He finally gets on the practice list, and the countdown. His 21-day practice window opened this week, and in his first practice back, just like Corey Trice Jr. a couple weeks ago when he re-aggravated an injury, I believe in his second practice back from his 21-day practice window. Now the same thing has happened to Kent, and reporting is indicating that this injury is likely to keep Kent out of the rest of his rookie season. So that's really unfortunate. It'll be interesting to see, actually, if the Steelers bring in somebody at corner in the weeks to come here to be more cornerback depth, because I think the Steelers were kind of banking on Kent being a little bit of depth for them at corner, specifically slot corner. And with him likely out for the rest of the season, they're definitely getting light in that area, especially after letting go of Darius Slay and putting him on waivers earlier this week. So you feel for Mr. Kent there. I think that he's one of those guys heading into next year, kind of similar to Corey Trice, coming off of his ACL tear a couple years ago. I don't think the Steelers are going to be banking on him by any stretch of the imagination, but he can be a quote-unquote, happy surprise type of guy where, he could come into camp next year and look really good and play really well and maybe earn himself a spot in the rotation on defense. But the Steelers are not going to be assuming that heading into next season. He's going to have to earn everything after missing his entire rookie season as a 7th-round pick. Kent has certainly still got a lot to prove in this league before the Steelers can get the type of player that they think they have in him, because they are really high on what Dante Kent brings to the table, and he was showing some good things before he got injured this year. So wishing him the best and a full and speedy recovery, so that once we get to Latrobe next year, he can impress once again. But now, talking about the wide receiver situation here in Pittsburgh heading into Sunday, it does sound like Adam Thielen will be playing on Sunday. He has really made a point about, letting people know that he is doing a full crash course in Arthur Smith ease and with this Steelers offensive playbook, and it sounds like he's making progress in learning it, and it definitely sounds like the Steelers are fast-tracking him to play on Sunday. I believe Mark Capoli reported today that they're planning on using him as a slot wide receiver, which would likely mean Calvin Austin III or Roman Wilson or both are going to be playing Z for the Pittsburgh Steelers down the stretch, while Adam Thielen assumes that big slot role. So, when I think about that, guys, I'm really excited to see what Adam can do, because, everything that we have seen in practice this week indicates that he is moving really well. He's moving really quick. People are raving about his route running ability in the building and his hands and all that great stuff. So I would actually bet that Adam Thielen scores a touchdown this week. I think if there's any Steelers wide receiver, along with DK Metcalf, that scores a touchdown this week, I think Thielen in his first game, Rodgers is going to be trying to get him the ball, try to make this game special for him. If you're a betting man, and you're looking for an anytime touchdown on somebody, I think Adam Thielen would be a good bet. But speaking of the wide receiver room, Nick Farabaugh said on Pittsburgh radio today that he thinks Marquez Valdes-Scantling is going to play this week for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's finally going to be elevated off of the practice squad. Now, if that happens, I would expect Scotty Miller to be a healthy scratch. Scotty's been somebody that's made the game day roster for most games this year, but he hasn't really done anything at all. So, and that includes when Calvin Austin III was out with his injury. So I would be supportive of putting MVS, giving him a helmet. I don't know how much time he would see on the field, but he does have that experience with Aaron Rodgers. He's obviously got a lot of speed. Did some good things last year with the New Orleans Saints when he got an opportunity and he was able to get the football. So maybe Aaron Rodgers just feels like Calvin Austin III, Roman Wilson, these guys are a little bit too slight, a little bit too small. I want some more size in here. And it's possible that we could see, some packages where you've got Adam Thielen in the slot, Marquez Valdes-Scantling at Z, and then DK Metcalf at X. Like, it's very possible that we could see that kind of package for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I've been kind of contemplating whether or not the Steelers might go to a little bit more of a spread offense and maybe put 4 receivers out there on the field at times, even though we know that they've got a lot of tight ends here, Darnell Washington, Pat Freiermuth, Jonnu Smith. The heavy tight end stuff has just not worked at the level, especially as of late, compared to what the Steelers would want. So maybe Aaron Rodgers and Arthur Smith are going to maybe change lanes here a little bit and try to change courses late into the season and try and catch a spark, because obviously time is running out on this season, and the Steelers have had some success running some spread stuff this year, especially when they run in between the tackles with Jaylen Warren and Kenny Gainwell. Obviously, those guys are not bruising backs. They're more shifty backs. So when you go spread, you have more room in between the tackles there with just the 5 offensive linemen and the lighter boxes that you face. So that could be something that the Steelers are going to try. Something tells me we're going to see, a different style of Steelers offense on Sunday, and they're going to try and catch the Ravens off guard, because you better believe the Ravens are preparing for the jumbo personnel packages, and they're preparing for, all this different stuff we've seen from the Steelers offense as of late. But it really wouldn't shock me at all if we see something a bit different from the Pittsburgh Steelers, both in terms of personnel and in terms of identity here in Week 14 to try and get a big-time win on the road in Baltimore. Now, the last thing I want to talk about here, guys, is something that's being talked about a lot on Steelers Twitter. So I wanted to put in my 2 cents here, which is that George Pickens is starting to finally show his true colors in Dallas, it appears. As last night on Thursday Night Football, really, it felt like a must-win game for the Dallas Cowboys against the Detroit Lions. CeeDee Lamb exits the game with a concussion, and George Pickens does not play his best game. And, something that we have seen a lot as Steelers fans on his film when he was here in Pittsburgh, him not running routes 100%, he's getting blasted on Cowboys Twitter, on NFL Twitter today, for really going nonchalant on a lot of his routes last night in a must-win game. And it's even drawing criticism from guys like Richard Sherman on the Thursday Night Football postgame show, saying that he looked disinterested and all this different stuff. And then today, George Pickens on IG unleashed a profanity-laced meltdown on IG, calling out Richard Sherman, saying that he wasn't that good of a player, all this different stuff, and calling him a fraud, all these different things. And it just reminded me, and I think it should remind everybody in this fan base, this is why the Pittsburgh Steelers traded George Pickens away. This is why the Dallas Cowboys were the only team in the entire league that was willing to pay a third-round pick for this guy, despite how talented he is. It's just because of the off-field antics that just come with the George Pickens experience. And the Steelers wanted to get that out of their locker room, and they were willing to, take a price tag that was less than his talent to be able to do that. And as I've said on this channel, guys, that doesn't change the fact that the Pittsburgh Steelers didn't do a good enough job getting him the football when he was here and making the most of his skill set. That doesn't mean that the Steelers, did a good job replacing him during the offseason at wide receiver 2 and at the trade deadline. Obviously, they did not. None of that changes the mistakes that the Steelers made with George Pickens. But, I think Pickens really cost himself a lot of money with his comments towards Richard Sherman today, and of course with his play last week, because, I think last night was the perfect example of George Pickens is not a winning football player. All right. In terms of games that you should be motivated to run your routes, full speed, with full effort, all that different stuff. That was one of those games where you have to play well. It's a must-win game for your squad. It's on the road, prime time game. Against another team that's fighting for playoff positioning in the NFC. And if you lose the game, your team has less than a 10% chance of making the playoffs. That feels like a must-win game. And he just looked disinterested. I have to agree with Richard Sherman on that. And the fact that Pickens completely melted down on IG today just shows the lack of maturity there, the lack of professionalism, stuff that we don't want in the Steelers locker room. So even though Pickens is an all-world caliber talent, and he's going to continue to have good games throughout his career, and I'm sure in those games Steelers fans will lament how the Steelers don't have him on the team. But it's moments like this that remind you that there's more than just the football player, right? This isn't Madden. You have to deal with the human being as much as you have to enjoy the player that you have on the field, and it's a balancing act. And I'm just not sure if any team in the National Football League is going to be able to properly balance George Pickens. I hope that George figures things out in terms of his maturity and his professionalism, and I'm hoping he can figure that out, because I genuinely do believe he's got a good heart at his core, and I want to see him succeed. But it's just at this point he's had so many opportunities to get right and get that part of his profile figured out, and at least to this point it hasn't been figured out. So at the end of the day here, man, if the Steelers can find that long-term wide receiver 2 to pair with DK Metcalf, 3-4 years down the line here, I think we're going to be looking at the George Pickens situation and saying the Steelers probably made the right decision letting him go. So that's where I'm going to leave you guys today, man. I appreciate you sitting here listening to me here today. We're going to have more Steelers content for you guys tomorrow. We've got a really interesting QB Spotlight video tomorrow. I'm going to let you guys know who I believe is the most likely target for the Pittsburgh Steelers at the quarterback position in 2026. And we also have our mailbag. Also, if we get any updates on MVS being elevated from the practice squad or anything like that, I'll make sure to get some content on this channel for you guys. And as always, we will be going live on Sunday for Steelers Game Day. This is one of the biggest ones of the year, maybe the biggest one of the year to this point, guys. Steelers, Ravens week on the road for the division lead, which is 4 games left to go, man. I can't wait. Make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already, and join us on Sunday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time for this week's Steelers Talk Watch Party.